Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you have a unique experience you'd like to share as a guest. Podmatch helps you connect with guests and hosts who have similar interests, experiences, and goals, making sure that each connection is meaningful and impactful. Thanks to Podmatch, I've connected with parents and caregivers worldwide and supported them in sharing their stories on Quiet Connection. If you'd like to check them out, visit www.joinpodmatch.com/Quiet Connection Podcast and learn more. Welcome back to Quiet Connection, a podcast dedicated to ending the stigma surrounding perinatal mental health. I'm Chelsea. Today I'm connecting with Hilary, who's calling all the way from France. Hilary is a mom and a writer who, like me, lives with adrenal insufficiency, a condition that requires constant vigilance and synthetic hormones just to survive. She also suffers with severe asthma. When Hilary went looking for books on how to talk to her son about chronic illness, she found a void in the market. Today, she's filling that gap. We're diving deep into what it means to parent through a flare, how to prepare children for medical emergencies without fear, and why being a disabled parent might actually be a hidden superpower. Whether you're managing a chronic condition or just feeling the heavy weight of parental burnout, this episode is a reminder that you're doing a better job than you think. Here's Hilary. Hello! Today I am here with Hilary, all the way from France. Hilary, how are you?
Doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm doing okay. Hilary is another one of my very, very kind guests who has navigated the cycle of scheduling and rescheduling with me, and we're finally together, and I'm so excited to chat with you. But I would love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and also let us know who you were before starting your parenting journey.
Sure. Right now, I live, as you said, I'm very spoiled. I live in the Loire Valley in France, so I'm surrounded by castles and wine, and it's very beautiful and wonderful. I moved here about 8 years ago with my husband, who's French, and our son is 5. Before that, in I am from the United States, so I we moved here from Chicago, and I had been in Chicago for about 10 years. And my whole background is in adult education, so helping adult immigrants learn English and get the skills they need to become citizens, but also helping people who stopped out of high school get their GED or their high school equivalent. So I'm very passionate about adult education. I was a teacher, I was an administrator, I worked in publishing for a long time. And when I moved to France, those skills didn't quite translate. The education system here is just so different. I also worked for a long time with nonprofits. Those don't really exist in France because the government provides so many wonderful services. So I've mostly been doing writing since I've been here, writing textbooks and articles. And the book that I'm working on right now is called The Art of Parenting While Sick, and it's for parents who have chronic health conditions. And I wrote that because I myself have 2 conditions and I couldn't find any books on the topic. I was kind of amazed. So
Yeah.
that's where I am today.
That was definitely initially what drew me to you. You are I've talked, if you've listened to the podcast, you've heard me talk about Podmatch, and you were a Podmatch match. And when I read your profile, I was like, oh, a fellow chronically ill mother talking about parenting through chronic illness. Because you're right. There isn't a whole lot out there about, there's communities out there for people who experience chronic illness, but in terms of parenting and how you navigate that, not so much. So,
And
yeah.
I can so that was so interesting to me because in my first few years as a parent, my first 3 years, I had been in the hospital already a few times because my 2 conditions are severe asthma, which happens to about 8 to 10% of people with asthma. It just instead of getting better as they get older, it gets worse and stops responding to medications. So because of that, I was on prednisone so much that I developed adrenal failure, which I know you understand intimately.
Yes.
And so I had been in the hospital either with an asthma exacerbation or adrenal crisis several times before my son was even, talking. And I just worried one day, what am I going to tell him when he gets older? I had just come out of the ER, but it was just for a one-day stay. It wasn't anything crazy, so we could just say, "Mom's not feeling well." But I knew when he was older, I would need something. And when I got on Amazon, I mean, I'm sure you can imagine this, I thought there would be hundreds of I mean, not hundreds, but dozens of titles at least. I thought I'd be choosing between a few and reading, say, this reviews is this one covers this. There was just nothing. There was
Mm-mm.
a couple that were 15 to 20 years old, very focused on terminal illness. So,
Mm.
I mean, I wound up buying them as I was doing research, but I wouldn't have bought them otherwise because they felt a little freaky to me. Like the chapters had titles that said things like, planning a funeral is a family process. And I just thought,
Yeah.
God, I'm not there yet. I just want to know how to talk to my son about having a condition. And so, I did that thing where I thought, well, if I need it, I'll do it myself. And so I started reaching out to parents with all kinds of conditions and family and child psychologists and foundations. And everybody was so eager to talk and it was so wonderful and so easy that it just made it felt right. I thought, okay, I did not expect it the day I came in and got online to look at books that I would become like the expert on this, but there is no other one, so I'll do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and I love that, and I love that, and I'm so grateful that you're doing that because you are providing a resource for there are so many of us, like you said, there are so many of us out there that are just doing it. The closest I came, I wrote, an article I write for Vermont Mom Blog, and I wrote an article about parenting disabled, and I mean, it resonated with people because people
Mhm.
are experiencing that, but, yeah, it just needs to be talked about more, and I'm so excited to sort of get into the intricacies with you because while we have a lot of similarities in terms of secondary adrenal issues, mine was due to a pituitary tumor, so I'm fully synthetic. I I don't produce any hormones or anything. You were sort of struggling this prior to becoming a parent, and this happened to me post-parenting.
Mhm.
So I'm curious to hear, did you always picture yourself becoming a mother? And I feel like that's an even more complex question when you're dealing with health issues on the daily. Was being a mother something you always wanted to do?
And you're exactly right. I just wanna say that's a really good question because I talk to so many parents, and I would say there is a big demarcation between the ones who went in, often very cautious, having the health issues and maybe postponing it, and maybe talking with a giant team of genetic counselors and specialists to make sure it was okay, versus people that had that happen afterward and then were coping with the huge identity shift of becoming a new parent along with a health condition and trying to care for, another person and themselves at the same time. I do think it is actually two different groups. I think that's a great question. For me personally, I think I did always want to be a parent. But I also met my husband later in life, and I was, I think I would have been okay either way. But now that we have our son, I can't imagine any other life. Of course, I mean he's my favorite person. I love my husband too, but the connection with a child is just so. I never really understood it till I became one, and it's so intense and it's so wonderful, and I just adore him. But I also had a very rich life before I had my child at 40, so I did have a glimpse of what, it could have been like otherwise, if I hadn't met my husband. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes, I always
Yeah.
pictured myself becoming one, and I'm delighted now that I am.
Yeah, that absolutely answers my question. Like, I would have to assume that there was a different planning process in terms of going into that journey, talking about, "Okay, how is this gonna impact my asthma?" Because asthma is heavily impacted by pregnancy, and what's it gonna look like? Like, am I gonna be able to continue my medications? Or I mean, you can speak on that more. This is all me assuming. But when you were planning to have your son, what did that kinda look like for you?
I think that, I had had asthma for my whole life. It got a lot worse in my late 20s and then just kept getting worse, and I'm in my mid 40s now. But I don't think I it took me a long time to realize sort of how bad it had gotten. I just kept thinking it was, "Oh, well, I had this flare up or I had this really bad respiratory infection that lasted then I had a cough for 8 months," or whatever. It kept feeling like one-offs till I really real and so I would say that even went into being that same time frame of being pregnant, and I only developed, adrenal insufficiency about less than a year before I got pregnant. I I didn't really understand it as a condition yet, is
Mhm.
fair to say. My doctors had said, "Just take 20 milligrams a day of this pill and you'll be fine." They didn't, and as you and I know, it's this incredibly difficult to manage condition. It's a lot like diabetes. Your body stops producing a chemical you need to survive. You have to take a synthetic version multiple times a day. Without that, you will not live another day. That's very frightening in itself. I think a lot of people don't even understand what it's like to live with that, just in terms of something like COVID and seeing supply chain interruptions and how scary that can be to be dependent on a medication. It massively changes your hormones, as you said. It changes your weight. I mean, just changes so many things. And I think I just was a little naive when I got pregnant because my doctor was saying, "Oh, you're fine. You can absolutely get pregnant." Because biomedically, yes, I could get pregnant with the condition, but I didn't think at all about how it might impact my parenting afterward. Um, I was really lucky that even though I feel like I kind of have a lemon body, I had the easiest pregnancy, smooth.
Mm.
So very lucky. That was great. Smooth birth and no postpartum. Although I'm incredibly empathetic for all things maternal mental health and
Yeah.
especially how little we know about hormones and how much they plunge after birth and how little we know about that. I have so much empathy for all the conditions that we know very little about because I would actually say that's sort of most conditions. And I think
That if yeah.
my hope is that in 50 years we will be in a place when it comes to hormones that we were maybe 50 or 60 years ago with hearts or something like that, where we just knew barely anything and now we know so much. And I hope it's the same.
Yeah. Yeah, and so much of what you're saying makes total sense. I'm so thankful that you had a smooth pregnancy too, because
Very
it could have
lucky.
gone so many different ways,
Hmm.
and I know, like, with the smile on your face too, and especially when you said, like, "I have a lemon body," that like, something that I came to terms with later because this happened to me after, but to hear that you experienced a smooth pregnancy is like, when every single other, like, function of your body is just working against you every day to be able to experience a pregnancy and find joy and birth and find joy and not deal with postpartum mental health challenges is like, okay, all right. One thing, like, thank you for this one thing that went smoothly, right?
And, but I also think we have a superpower. I don't know if you've read the book Unfit Parent by Jessica Slice. Do you know this book? It's about
No.
being a disabled parent. And she has multiple different threads throughout that I adore. Um, but the one that resonated most closely with me is that her her argument going in is that it can be dangerous to be a disabled parent in terms of child protective services getting called more frequently on disabled parents. But in fact, maybe disabled parents are more fit to be parents. They're more creative. They're more resilient. They're so used to being flexible. They're so used to the day not going how they want it to go. They've given up on perfectionism years ago. They're not looking at Instagram feeling guilty because they're not making perfect little snacks. Really open to just constantly redefining what parenting looks like. It's such an extraordinary book, and it meant so much to me to read it. And I just did a book review on it for Literary Mama because I loved the book so much. I wanted to talk about that particular thread because I was seeing it wasn't in the other book reviews, and I thought how funny it must be because I'm a parent with a chronic condition. Because I think that, even though the birth technically was 17 hours and I only had like a Tylenol for the first 10 hours, I'm not trying to say like I'm so tough, but I am. It's
Yeah.
not the first time I've been in a hospital room miserable and like figured it out and just kind of read magazines and and granted, I'm lucky to live in France and in the 21st century. And I did get an epidural after 12 hours. And then I just popped on a Netflix comedy special and that was great. But I'm just saying, I do think I feel like I've had training
Yeah.
on how to do so much of parenting because of this other thing.
Yeah. That yes. That is It is a superpower. It is a superpower. And like I said, like I try so hard to like not make these episodes about me in any way, shape, or form, but so much is resonating with me. But it's also because, like you said, there is that divide. There's the people who have struggled with chronic conditions for most of their life, and then people who develop them later in life. And so it's almost like I'm sitting here feeling like, feed me more, feed me, like, tell me more, because I am in this stage where I'm learning to accept those things that you're talking about, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, because with my first daughter, it was like that. I was striving to be the Pinterest mom. And I was an educator as well, an elementary educator and a special educator. So I was doing all the things with her. She could spell her name when she was 3.5 years old. She could do math and things like that. And then with my youngest now, I'm like, I suck at everything, right? Like, I can't get down on the floor and play with you like you want me to do, and I can't do these things. So, yeah, so I'm gonna have to reel it in for this episode because 'cause I'm looking at you like, it is a superpower, it is strength, and I can look at it this way, but this is your time and this is your story.
No,
So
no, but I wanna pick out and respond to something you just said though, because, I've worked with so many parents now at this point, probably like 200, and doing different trainings and one-on-one and interviewing people for the book, and I think the number one thing I hear all the time is guilt, and I just heard it from you. And
yeah.
it sounds like you're a wonderful parent, and it's just amazing how much we beat ourselves up, but one of the things I am trying to turn there's so much that I wanna look at differently now having written this book in terms of changing the conversation, and a big one is this parenting from the couch thing could actually be a blessing, and that there's so much that you can do from home, and I have a whole chapter because I wanted this. Again, I'm trying I initially interviewed about 15 parents just to figure out what everyone else wanted and was very relieved to see that it was what I wanted. Because I would have happily gone wherever people wanted me to go, but it was good to know we all had the same sort of needs. And one was, what is some screen-free stuff I can do on these days when I can't I don't want my kids to be watching movies the entire day, but I'm also stuck on the couch, or I can't get on the floor and crawl around. I mean, I think one of the barriers that I have encountered in the process are misunderstandings. And I think often it comes from outside the community. So maybe more like able bodied perspective on it is, how could one book or one set of resources possibly apply to so many different conditions? And I'm on the other hand hearing parents who have epilepsy, who have MS, cystic fibrosis, ALS, recurrent cancer, myasthenia gravis, endometriosis. I mean, these are radically different genetic, infectious, autoimmune conditions that lead to parents having identical needs. What do I do in a medical emergency? I'm totally freaked out that my kid's going to see me get put in an ambulance at some point. How do I deal with that? How do I talk to them about being sick? How do I talk to them about having a flare up? What do I do when they're really disappointed that I can't do something? What do I do about my co parent who I feel like is doing way too much a lot of the time and I feel really guilty about that? How do I lean on my support network? What if I don't have a support network? I mean, but all the
Yeah.
questions are the same. And so I think that having these activities that we can do, this way of reframing, thinking about being home, how much quality time you actually can do, even if you feel awful, like if you're just sitting from the
Yeah.
couch. And what you said about not being able to get down on the floor, I thought about that quite a bit. I interviewed several different occupational therapists to get tips for adjusted activities and also for people with joint pain or people who can't, have limited mobility. So I'm just saying your threat of guilt, unfortunately, the best parents through this project, I have met the best parents I've ever met, and they're all like, "I'm just so worried I'm not a good enough parent," and then I don't know.
So, on the opposite end of things, like being in heavily in the perinatal mental health side of things, that's a common thread. I think every parent to a certain degree holds guilt for something. They feel like they're failing in one way or another. I think it's definitely amplified when you add chronic illness and disability on top of it. And you talked about it a little bit too. There's stigma. There's fear, like you said, like Child Protective Services in terms of disabled families, and their interactions with that whole system. So I think we all carry a little bit of guilt and shame just as parents, but it's a different it's a different breed, when you're physically not capable of doing the things that an able-bodied person could do. But like you said, just like you said, I also feel like some of the strongest connections I've made have been on my couch or in my recliner with my kids, right? Like, sitting in my lap and playing with each other's hair and just talking to my 3.5-year-old, right? And even when she was a lot younger. I'd love to talk about your experience. And you mentioned too, like about our partners being caregivers in those early postpartum days, and I'm sure still throughout today, like what was that like for you caring for a newborn? How was your health at that point? And what was the dynamic like between you and your partner at that point?
Really lucky in that, those hospitalizations I did mention, a knock on wood, haven't had any for a few years. So I'm more or less stable in that I can parent pretty well. I just have to be very careful and hyper vigilant. Cat hair will put me in the hospital. I
Yeah.
love cats so much, but from afar because that's sort of my kryptonite. So we have to be very careful in France. My husband and my son both have so many friends who have cats, and we just can't go to their houses, and we have to be careful, and that is honestly the most annoying way that it impacts our family, but it's so interesting. Like, I thought early on, "This is gonna ruin my child's life. He's not gonna have any friends. He's gonna resent me." And he's almost 6, and it's been fine. It's been and, it was so I felt like even though I'm writing this book, I learn things anew all the time, and one was in just a couple months ago in January. I planned a big skiing trip for my son and I, and he was so excited. And we were going to go to this beautiful place in the middle of France that's full of volcanoes. It's called the Auvergne, and they're high enough that some get snow. And they're pretty mellow slopes, so perfect for a beginner. And he was so excited. He was talking about it so much. I'm gonna have hot chocolate. I'm gonna wear skis. I'm gonna do this, this, and this. And then I wound up having a really, 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 really bad asthma flare up, and I just felt like it was unsafe to go. Like I was starting to get better, but it would not. It was a 5.5 hour drive. It would have been just me. My husband couldn't come because of work stuff, and I felt so bad to cancel it. I felt like it was the first time in my son's life that I had to cancel something because of my health, something big like this that we, lost money because I had to cancel the Airbnb. And I was feeling really frustrated about it. And 2 things happened. One was he was so sweet about it. He just said, "Oh, that's okay because if we go actually, I wanna go the 3 of us anyway. I don't wanna go without Papa, and I wanna make a snowman together." I don't know, he had invented that we were all gonna make a snowman together. But then the second kind of bigger thing was we were supposed to leave, I think, on a Thursday, and that Friday night, his fever shot up to 40. Now I think in Celsius, what is it in Fahrenheit? That's like 104, I think. And he wound up coming down with the worst flu. So it was so good we didn't go. So even though it was just really interesting, it was this thing I had felt so guilty about. I was so nervous to tell him. Not nervous, but just, I thought he sometimes gets really upset if things like that are canceled. And for him to be A, so chill, and then B, me be so grateful that the trip hadn't happened because he got so sick. We would have just driven 5.5 hours there to come back 5.5 hours.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I keep challenging my own expectations that it is necessarily bad or hard or impacts the family.
Yeah. And I actually love that, and as you were describing that, it occurred to me that sometimes I frame it in a negative way, but our kids have not known us in any other form. This is you know what I mean? When I say that my kids are very much into Pokemon right now, so I'm always like,
Ditto.
this is my yeah, this is my current form, my current evolution. But our kids have only ever known us this way. So that empathy, I think, is also a superpower that is built into our kids
Mhm,
because this is the life that we live, right? Like, and it isn't all negative. Just like you said for you, cats are like your kryptonite, right? And you were talking about how you're like, oh, it's going to be so challenging like, do we just not see anybody? Does my kid not going to have any friends because all of his friends have cats? And it's similar for us. I'm immune compromised. So like my daughter wants to be like, can we have so and so over and can we do this? Can I go to this birthday party? And it's having the conversations like, well, okay, I have to talk to their parents, see if anybody's been sick recently or so it's those conversations that you think are going to be awkward and are going to be hard, but your kids have only ever known that. My kids
mhm,
have only ever
mhm,
known. I mean, my oldest has known a little different, but it's been so long now, it's been over 3 years, almost 4 years now, that their superpower kind of is empathy and understanding. And I'm grateful. It sounds like you said, like, you've been pretty stable. Your son has not had to witness you getting into an ambulance. I'm my kids have had to see it several times, and I'm curious if you've had conversations with other parents about, like, what that looks like, and because, I mean, I know how we handle it or don't handle it. But what are you seeing in the parenting community for others who are experiencing this and who do end up in the back of an ambulance more often than they would like?
I think that, you just said so much that was so interesting. I wanted to respond to the 4
I'm
different points in
sorry.
there. No, there was just a bunch. I will respond, but just help me stay on track because I did
Okay.
really wanna just respond briefly to your point about empathy. I think it's an excellent point, and I talk to so many parents, and one of my favorite things is talking to parents of adult children, because then I can kinda see how it turned out, um, who say their kids are super empathetic, grew up just way more empathetic than their peers, more likely to stand up to bullies, things like that. Um, One woman I spoke with early on, Kisa, really impacted me. Her kids, she had lupus when they were growing up, and they missed out on a lot of stuff, sleepovers. Um, she couldn't always help them with homework. I mean, she felt so guilty all the time. Not only have they turned out wonderfully, but one became a doctor. Her rheumatologist wrote his recommendation letter because he got to know him so well. So I really have loved hearing all the positives throughout, and also hearing her say, "Oh, they don't care at all that they missed a few sleepovers. Whatever. We're so close as a family. To this day, we get together several times a week. My kids knew how to make Thanksgiving from the time they were 12, and they've always helped out cooking." And, just hearing that, because I also work with a lot of parents with kids my son's exact age, so we're all kind of in the boat of, well, I don't I don't know, we're gonna see where it goes. It's nice to hear from people ahead, on the path that say, "It's fine. It
Yeah.
turned out fine." And she wasn't sure she was gonna make it to their graduation. That's something I hear a lot. I feel like so many of the parents I talk to say, "I just wanna make it to my kid's graduation." Even if they don't I mean, so many conditions with the proper care and treatment, you have an average lifespan. There are also people that pass away from them, and that can be always in the back of your mind. So sorry, I just wanted to respond to the
No,
empathy
I
point.
love that. I love that.
Um, and then in terms of the hospitalizations. So medical emergencies and hospitalizations have kind of become my specialty that I'm doing with foundations in particular and with clinicians because to me, it's very black and white, clear things that can be added to the referral pathway that can be tacked on. I'm doing a survey right now with parents. It's still only half the way through, but from the responses I've seen so far, I'm loving the very clear direction because it's a survey designed to ask what would you want parenting supports to look like. There's a ton of research that has shown parents need supports, none that shows what it should look like. So I'm asking everybody, when do you want it? How often do you want it? What topics do you want? What do you want? And feedback I'm getting is videos that they can watch anytime, which makes
Mm.
a ton of sense. Easier, for a lot of people who are immunocompromised like you, they don't necessarily want to go in and do a big family group training in a hospital. So I'm really hoping to turn some of this research into action soon. But in the meantime, during my own trainings, and my analogy that I use a lot of the time is that it's like, I think most families probably have a fire extinguisher somewhere in the house. But if there's a grease fire, it would just be pandemonium because no one even remembers where it is or how to use it, right? So my,
Right.
my analogy is like, if you just take the 5 minutes to watch someone use a fire extinguisher on YouTube and how to pull the pin, how to check the expiration date, where we keep it, how to use it, what to do with it afterward, then you go outside, then you call, emergency services. You can have that conversation a couple times, and then if it happens, so much less chaotic. Still scary, but everyone knows exactly what to do, and so that's what I'm trying to communicate for any kind of medical emergency, whether it's an adrenal crisis, thyroid crisis, seizure, asthma attack, how to call 911, the kinds of questions children should be prepared to ask. A lot of kids have been told not to tell strangers things, and all of a sudden they have a dispatcher saying, "What's your address? What's your phone number? What's your parents' name?" And telling them it's okay in this context to do that. So that's medical emergencies. For hospitalizations, I have had a couple. We have talked to my son about a few. I am going to be going into the hospital to get a pump. I don't know if you have a pump for
I
your.
don't have a
Okay.
pump right now. No.
I might be one of the first people in France to do it. We're waiting on approval still.
Ooh.
But if I know it's very exciting, but if I get the pump, they're gonna have me go in for several days just to make sure that it adjusts properly and that I'm trained to do it and all of that because, I think it's very new for dogs. It's done differently in every country. Like a lot of people in the UK are on pumps. But anyway, so I'm going to have to do this soon with my son to prepare him, have the conversation. This is a planned hospitalization, but still have pleasant visits and make it seem fun. And that's one of the things that I learned when writing the book and talking to child life specialists. And I'm sorry, I'm realizing I'm getting long in this, so cut me
No,
off if you want.
no, this is
Okay,
perfect.
because but this is my sort of passion topic.
I can tell.
But because I think a lot of people would assume hospitals scare kids, but that's sort of us projecting onto them. I think if a hospitalization, you can plan for an unpredictable hospitalization. You can have a family plan with the urgent centers or hospitals you prefer to go to, who should call who, what pet needs attention, what kids need to be picked up where, who can do that, who should be notified, what list of things you want to have that you want to bring, walk through it with your partner or your parent or your friend, whoever's going to help pack that bag for you ahead of time so they know how to do it, where to find all the weird places that maybe you keep your ear pods or whatever.
Yeah.
And that when you're there, especially with young children, you can make it kind of fun. You can go to the gift shop, you can bring a gift, you can look at photos of all the equipment ahead of time and say, "Oh, look, there's the oxygen monitor, there's you can teach them the color of scrubs that nurses wear versus surgeons. Oh, that one, I think it's a surgeon, and it just doesn't have to be this big scary thing. Even if the parent feels kind of miserable and it's scary for the parent, there are still ways to make it reassuring for the child.
That is all things that see, I told you sometimes I can't even form sentences. Um, those are all things that I'd never even considered. I'd never even considered those. And I have had lengthy hospital stays and I've had lots of emergencies. But my brain doesn't always go to like, okay, if I'm going to be there for a long period of time, are my kids going to come? Because at this point, my kids have never visited me for a
Mm,
hospitalization.
mhm.
Because in my mind, it's like, let's not deviate them from their schedule and from their norm. But this is another sort of lesson for me. It coincides with something that I was told when I was going through my psychiatric issues with PMHDs, which was because of the tumor, we think. But anyway, I had a therapist. I was just sobbing and I'm like, I just want to be a mom. I just want to be a mom. I can't take care of my kids. I just want to be a mom. And he said to me, "Why can't you? Why can't you be a mom? You are a mom." And what you just described to me aligns so perfectly with that because when I'm in the hospital, I'm like, well, I can't parent them anyway. Like, there's no point in them coming, seeing me sitting in a bed. Why? Why can't I have my kids come see me? Why can't we talk about these are the nurses, these are the CNAs? We love nurses and CNAs. Like, this is adding, like, I feel like I should be taking notes. It's a good thing we're recording this because I'm learning. Like, it doesn't have to be scary. Um,
Keep parenting from the bed, even if you feel awful. And if their kids are there for 5 minutes, mealtime's always a great time to come because no nurses are coming in and out, and you can still say, "How'd you do on your math test? How did you,
yeah.
what?" Like all the, I think we do feel like we have to defer parenting to the other parent, but I think it's actually reassuring to kids to come in and see their parents, the same parent. I think, like you said, whether or not kids should come is subject to a lot of questions, right? Like I think if people that are immunocompromised. If any kid has been even remotely sick or they've been around their best friend who's sick, probably shouldn't come. The ICU rather doesn't typically allow kids under 12. There's just all these different reasons that maybe kids shouldn't. If the parent's in really bad shape or really feeling unwell, or maybe they had surgery and they're kind of bruised, or so it's not like it should happen 100% of the time. But a lot
Right.
of who I'm talking to are people with lupus, kidney disease, bad asthma, Addison's, where they might wind up there because of some sort of health crisis, but feel-ish okay once they get treatment, and then they're just kept there for a day or 2 for monitoring, and I think in that case, it's totally up to the co-parent, and, the kid might have, a play in a soccer game, so they can't get there, it just, really depends, but it's nice to have a plan for what can happen
Yeah.
for the unexpected. It just makes it much more easy to manage.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's appealing to my OCD. I like to have plans for everything.
Me too. I know. I'm going to have to cut myself off from writing forms at the end of every chapter because I have so many forms parents can fill out. And yeah,
Good form. I literally am sitting here thinking to myself, like, okay, I can make a spreadsheet of like, because we kind of know who our backup people are and we know who we always call, but like, they also don't know how to administer my emergency medications if I was ever in an adrenal crisis or like, so as we're talking about this, I'm like, okay, I need to make a checklist. I need to do this. I need to do this. And it's all very helpful. So again, bringing it back to sort of your experience a little bit, you have been pretty stable, which is great, but you do still have to make adjustments in life.
I'm miserable a lot of the time, like physically, right? But
Yeah.
I'm not in the hospital. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? That is the
Mhm.
chronically ill life. If a lot of people felt like I did a lot of the time, they'd be
They'd
panicked,
be in the hospital.
just in terms of feeling having a hard time breathing when it's asthma stuff and then when it's adrenal stuff. I mean, I don't have to tell you, like,
Ugh.
when you're really sick, having that double whammy of the adrenal on top of that, where trying to figure out how to updose and how much.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've just kind of accepted I probably won't feel well a lot of the time for the rest of my life, barring amazing advances in
Right,
medication.
some miracle for yeah. You'd think, like, so when you said you were getting the pump, I was like, that was I don't know how common that is in the US because it's never been brought up to me, and I'm like, my pituitary gland is non-functional. It's dead. So I'm not making any hormones, but no one and I'm on steroids forever, just like you are, as well as other medications, but I've never been talked about. The pump has never been discussed with me, or anything like that. But there's also this analogy. My husband brought up to me. My husband was severely injured in a motorcycle accident just before our youngest was born. So he's in chronic pain all of his life. And his doctor would be like, "So what level of pain are you in?" And he's like, "The normal amount." And the doctor's like, "The normal amount is 0." And he's like, "Oh, well, it's not 0." And when we talk about, right, like you saying, like, I'm pretty stable, but I feel pretty crappy most of the time, but that's like the norm. God, does that resonate with me? Um,
I
I'm
just
not
want to be
sure.
honest. I like being honest for all the parents out there that are
My God, please.
feeling, struggling with a health issue. Yeah.
Yes, but that is our default, right? Like we're like, yeah, things are okay. I haven't been to the hospital in a little while. And for anyone else it'd be like, well, I haven't ever been to the except for since I had my child. But yeah, so like I totally get that. I totally relate to that. When you are having a flare, when for anyone who's not familiar with the term flare or like a flare day, it's a day when your symptoms are amplified. So every day we're kind of at a base level of symptoms. We're always experiencing symptoms of some kind. And then a flare day is one that can really knock you down. All your symptoms are intensified. And then it's a totally different thing when you get sick. Like if you catch a cold or if you get COVID or if you a stomach virus can wind you in the ICU when you have adrenal insufficiency. But when you're experiencing those flare days, how personally do you adjust your expectations in terms of your parenting style?
Like I said, I think it's helpful to have that plan of parenting from the couch. And I'll also answer this from the perspective of, because I do like to think about and talk about all the parents I've worked with too. Lupus, myasthenia gravis, rheumatoid arthritis, sickle cell, those are the ones kind of jumping into my head of parents that I've talked to that have had these kind of classic flare-ups, where in particular with lupus, the joint pain can just get so bad that they can have such a hard time moving and have to take scalding hot showers and do crazy things. And so for those parents, for example, they teach their kids ahead of time from a very young age how to do things like buckle their own seatbelt, braid each other's hair before school, pack their own lunches, these things so that if the flare-ups do happen, they know how to do those things even though they're really little. And kids can learn a lot of stuff from a young age. I think that the plan for co-parenting, I'm just such a big fan of hyper communicating um
Yes.
when it comes, because this stuff
Yes.
is so complicated, and I'm writing a book on it, and my husband, I don't always do the best job of it. I mean, my husband's so supportive and wonderful, but I think the idea is to really map out household responsibilities very clearly. So he and I have a very clear Like, you do this, I do this. It's a little random. Like, I do recycling of paper and plastic, but he does glass. I don't know. I just we really like because the glass place is in a different it's in a different place, so he does that. I don't
Yeah.
know, but like we just really have our lanes. I garden the garden, he mows the lawn. But that helps for when I'm really not feeling well to be able to say, I can't do can you do these household responsibility things today? And really talking through and and just being very honest and communicative and talking about our needs when it comes to, again, these sort of social limitations. For the most part, again, he's so wonderful and understanding, but it is hard because his best friend and his partner have like 300 cats, and so we just can't go to they're not 300, but they have a lot, they've had a lot, like, it's just cat hair central, so we can't really go to their brand new house, and that's just, and I give my husband a lot of space for that to be heartbreaking and really frustrating, and it wouldn't hurt my feelings at all if at times he thought, "Oh, I wish I had a wife that didn't, that could just climb the Pyrenees with me and be in great health all the time." That doesn't
Yeah.
hurt me in the slightest because I'm very comfortable with and at terms with and accepting of my limitations, but I know that it's not always easy for the people around me. So I just think hyper communicative is really to be hyper communicative is especially important during flare ups and when saying, for the next few weeks to kids, can you help me out with unloading the dishwasher, walking the dog? Mama's joints are really in pain, or dad can't do this. Like, you can't climb on him right now. This is a household guideline for this week. You cannot climb. Like you were talking about birthday parties. I think I would group together household guidelines under all other ones. Don't jump on the couch, don't bring over friends who are sick. Wash your hands every time you come home. Just treating them all the same way, I think makes sense to kids.
Yeah. I keep saying I love. I really need to get a new word. I've been saying this for seasons now. Everything is I love. But it's very validating to hear you say that, and I also think that it's something that needs to be said so much more because, again, I said it earlier, there is so much negative emphasis put on, like, "Oh, this must be so horrible, and it must be so hard on your kids, and it must be so" but there's so much positive that can come out of this too. It doesn't feel like it sometimes in the moment, but just like you said, we're hyper communicative in my house as well. Um, and just like any other kid might have a little chore chart for when, like in the morning or in the afternoon, my kid has a chore chart, and the very first thing on it is wash your hands, especially if they've just come home from school or from somewhere else.
Mhm.
It's just part of the routine. It's not sad. It's not hard. It's not annoying. It's just another thing that we do. And the same thing, like, part of this I've seen can be a little bit controversial. We are a very med safe household, like, our meds are all kept in a safe space, but my 10-year-old can go get me my med box that I have to open and be in control of, but there are days where I can't get my own meds, and I will look at my 10-year-old and I'll be like, can you get mommy's med box?" And I watch her and she brings it to me. I say that's controversial because there are some people who are like, they shouldn't have any access to your medications. But for my 10-year-old, she knows that I take meds 4 times a day. She knows that those meds are for mommy only. And she feels a sense of, I don't want to say accomplishment, but she feels involved when she knows I'm having a hard day. And she's like, yeah, I can grab your med box, mom. Um, I don't know what your thoughts are on that at all, but it's just another one of those things because medications are stigmatized as well, but I rely on them to live, as do you. It's not something that is scary in my house. It's not something that is not talked about. She knows what it is. She doesn't know what all my medication names are because it's ridiculous. But, she knows what it is, she knows why I need them, and if I'm having a very, very, very bad sick day, she knows she can help mommy bring me my box, and I'll unlock it myself, and she doesn't have to do anything, but yeah, that was kind of a tangent. My point, I guess, was these things aren't scary, they're not sad, they're not it's not something to be pitied. This is just normal. It's just a different normal.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, yes, every family makes its own decisions and should do, but best practice, what a lot of health foundations would say is every family's every patient's family should be trained to know where the medication is, how to use it, how to clean it if it needs to be cleaned, how to administer it if it's administered, equipment. And I think the prevailing thought for young children is they're so curious, it helps demystify it. If you just say, "This is my nebulizer," it's not that exciting. You shouldn't play with it, but I'll show you all the parts so that you're not looking for it to wonder what's inside it. Like it's really not that interesting,
No.
And I'm sure you have a crisis injection kit. I have one. My son doesn't know where it is. My husband does. I think my son's just about old enough to learn where it is in case he needs to tell an EMT or something like that.
Mhm.
I think, and I'll show him. He's fascinated by it. I have shown him before but I'm nervous. There are the needle points in there and stuff, and I just always want him to be careful around it. But one of the moms in one of my trainings said for when her kids were young, if they ever found pills, she would give them a piece of candy if they brought her the pill. Right? I mean, there's just all these
Oh,
little things. It's
yeah.
and
That makes
it,
me a little nervous, but again, like you
but
said, like
her
every
point
family is
was
different.
But her point was the kids are so little, don't eat it. You'll get a reward if you bring it to me. Don't eat it.
Yes,
Don't hide it.
yes,
Just
yes,
bring it
yes,
to me.
yes.
So I don't know. Going back to the point, every family is different. Every family is going to have what they're comfortable with. But I think, a lot of foundations would say, and in particular for conditions where the medical emergency is debilitating or the person's really, really out of it or unconscious, it's helpful if family members, in particular, any kind of co-parents or family members that are often around, but also children 5 and up, really, that can be trained to do an awful lot. They can at the very least be trained to go get a neighbor or someone older and say what's going on. And then they can have further training if comfortable to administer the medications. They can absolutely have training for calling emergency services. I think that should be
Yes.
100% of families who can have medical emergencies. So I don't know if that
Yeah.
answers your question more or less,
Yeah,
but
and it
yeah.
wasn't even it was more of just like a wondering, I guess. And I wanna clarify, and I don't know if I did. This is my 10-year-old. I don't ask my 3-year-old to get my medications for me.
If you
Um,
did though, I wouldn't. I mean,
no, well,
it's
that's the thing.
every
So
3-year-old's different. Every family, like
my 3-year-old is very curious. She is starting she's almost 4, but she's starting to become much more curious. She knows that I take medicine. She knows that her sister takes medicine. My oldest daughter, has autism and ADHD, so she also takes medication. So there are times where she'll be like, "It's time for my meds," because 'cause I'll always say, like, "It's time for meds." "It's time for my meds," and I'll be like, "Well, you don't have meds. You don't need meds. You took your vitamins this morning." So it's a conversation we're having. She also the other day, because I recently was taken away in an ambulance, she was so calm, by the way. This was her first experience, like, her prior experiences, she either wasn't home or she was an infant. So this is her first experience as a little person witnessing this. She was comforting my older daughter, who was pretty okay, but she was like, "They're just here to take care of mommy." We've never had that conversation. And then as I was being taken out, they go, "You're gonna be okay, mommy. They're gonna take care of you." And I'm like, "But we've never even talked about EMTs. Like, we've never even so it just boggles my mind. But the other day she hurt her foot and she goes, "I think we gotta call the ambulance."
yeah,
And I was like, "Okay, so we need to have the conversation about emergencies versus stubbing your toe." But again, tangent rabbit hole. I think it is important. I think it's important that kids understand. They understand the difference between an emergency and just being sick, what it looks like when a parent or a caregiver is experiencing an emergency. And like you said, the only reason I am considering getting a landline of any kind is so that if I'm alone with my kids and there's an emergency, like I can teach my daughter how to unlock my cell phone, but it would be much easier to just have a landline for her to just be
yeah,
able to
yeah.
dial 911. What I am very curious about, just to steer our conversation a little bit and also be mindful of time, is because you are originally from the US and you are now living in France where there's a very different medical system, there's different supports, the way that just everything is handled is very different. What do you notice as the biggest differences in terms of managing your chronic illness in France versus the US?
So hard it's such a good question, and it's so hard to answer. I really should pick and have ready at any point my top 3 things because there's so many, like, I don't even know
Yeah.
where to begin. I will start by saying the way chronic conditions are treated is opposite here. Condition longue durée, it's like, long
Long-term
duration,
conditions.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and it is treated with exceptional care. Everything's even cheaper. It's even easier to access care. Related appointments are easier to get and have covered because it's assumed that these long-term conditions will cause other related conditions as opposed to, uh, what's the word? I've been away long enough, I'm forgetting. Pre-existing condition, right? Which is like
Yes,
not even
pre-exist
something that doesn't logically make any sense. That's
No.
pre-existing to what? The start of the insurance policy? It's such a odd.
Yes.
I mean, I
Yes,
know that, but, like,
essentially.
but to get out of paying for it, it's so, but
Yeah.
anyway, so it's just basically the opposite of that is one thing I would say. 2, I think I will pick this because it's so related to the work you do and the wonderful work of, Blue Dot and, maternal care in general. Having a baby is incredible here. I didn't get to experience the full benefits because I was pregnant at the height of the beginning of COVID.
Mhm.
So I didn't have And we were moving, so I realized in hindsight I missed out on a bunch of the typical appointments you get with a midwife, where they teach you everything. So I can't speak to exactly what they cover, but I know my friends who have done it learned so much. It's sort of like personalized what I guess you would learn in Lamaze, but just so much, like what the birth is going to be like, how to prepare for it, what to pack in your bag. I my birth was attended to by 3 midwives. They had obstetricians on call, of course, but because I had a pretty straightforward birth, it was very easy. It wasn't treated kind of like in the States, pregnancy's treated more like a scary you're going in for the scary thing. Here it was very relaxed. I love Roald Dahl, that children's book author, and his illustrator, Quentin Blake, and the maternity ward was just filled with original Quentin Blake art that was so
Oh,
beautiful. I just felt very relaxed underneath it.
yeah.
Um and then you're in the hospital for several days as opposed to just kinda getting thrown out after a
Moved
day or 2,
along. Yeah.
um, which I think some people are really eager to go back home, but I think the benefit that at least I had here was, the midwives taught me over and over how to do diapers, how to do baths, how to change him. I just felt so prepared to go home. They worked on nursing with me for days and days, how to give formula if he was exhibiting these kind of symptoms. It was wonderful. He lost a little too much weight, so I think I wound up staying there for about 6 days, but it was all free. It's not like you're stressed out like, "Oh god, this is gonna add $10,000 to my, bill or whatever,"
Yeah.
like I would be thinking in the States. And then you get 8 sessions with a, pelvic floor, physical therapist that helps
Ugh.
you, recover from I know, so right? It's just
Yeah.
I'm just picking random things because I could talk forever, but those are a few.
I
Yeah,
mean, that's
it's
a
just
completely if you wanna go, like, opposites, like, that's almost a complete opposite of an experience of birth in the US, unless you're incredibly deliberate and you birth at a specific birthing center and, like right, like, you have to really, really, really plan, whereas it sounds like these things were just this is how it goes.
what I will say, because I do like to always be complete and present lots of sides of things. The French system is not as good with mental health care.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how they do with postpartum care, but I don't know if it would be covered because psychologists generally aren't. So even though a lot of stuff is covered, that is one area that I actually think the States is a little more progressive in. So just to give a complete portrait, because a lot of the time I feel like people are always idealizing the French system, and it's not perfect, but it does do a lot of things really, really well, and it's a lot less expensive. No one's ever going to go bankrupt from having cancer.
Yeah. I will agree with you. I think we are attempting and working really, really, really hard to move in the right direction in terms of mental health in the US, whereas in some other countries it's not as prioritized. I don't think there is a single healthcare system in any country that is flawless.
Hmm.
Um, but I think we could all learn a lot from each other. We in the US certainly have a lot to learn from other cultures and other countries. But yeah, I appreciate you speaking on that. It's always interesting to me. Like I said, I've had guests from the UK, Australia, some I can't even list them all right now because I have brain fog and they're gone. But I have not spoken to someone who has given birth in France. So this is a new one that I can add to the list. But yeah, I guess this is remember I told you I would have a moment where all the tabs closed in my brain? That just happened. But it's okay because I'm gonna bring us back. I'm gonna start to wind us around, and I could literally talk about this and other things all day. We've hit on a lot of topics that resonated deeply with me, and I'm so hopeful that other families who not only experience chronic illness or disability, but who also just experience overwhelm or who experience burnout can hear what you've talked about today and what we've discussed and say, like, "Oh, it is okay. It's okay to give myself some grace. It's okay to parent from the couch. It's okay. These things are okay." So I'm super grateful to have been able to have the opportunity to chat with you, to learn from you. Like I said, I'm making a mental checklist of things that I need to write down and prepare when we're later today.
Well, I can say something to that as a closing point, which is, I am about to launch a website, Parenting While Sick, that will just have everything we're talking about for free. No, you have to subscribe to this to get it. None of that. Just like, because I just, again, I'm so passionate about putting out into the world what I wish I had. So I've made
Yes.
tons and tons and tons of worksheets and forms that will all be on there for how to do exactly all the things we talked about, plus a bunch more. So
You're speaking my love language. That is and you answered the question that I was going to ask, but I'm gonna have you elaborate. The question that I was gonna ask is for others who want to learn more, who want to learn more about what you're doing, who want to learn more about this book and just resources, where is the best place for them to look to learn more about you?
so the website is Parenting While Sick, and I'm just wrapping it up right now. So that's the best because I have an Instagram too, but I felt like I couldn't squeeze enough info into those little tiny carousels, and I wanted to have more. For me, it's really important to have scripts for parents that they can sort of say, okay, I'm going to plop in my thing here and add this or that. But I think that makes it so much easier to read from a script. So it was important to me to have resources that were a couple pages long that,
Yeah,
and comprehensive. So
I love that.
that's the best place to go.
It's gonna be linked in the show notes. I always tell my listeners, please check the show notes. You're gonna find the good stuff there, and you can find how to connect with my guests. So that's awesome. I'm looking forward to it. And now what I'm going to do is my new little exercise that I hope will be fun. I say this every time, and it's been a little while now, but I am a little bit woo woo. So I'm doing this thing where I'm asking us to go back in time where we weren't reachable all the time, like back before cell phones
Mm.
and stuff
Oh
like
God.
that, right?
I cannot be
Um
more nostalgic for that time.
Right? I know. Oh my gosh, it's totally off topic, but if you've ever heard of tin can phones for kids, like if your kids are begging you for a cell phone, I just learned about tin can phones and I'm like, "Oh, that's the greatest thing ever." It's essentially a landline and you have to approve like the other kid has to have a tin can phone. You can't just call anybody. I love that. Anyway, sidetrack. So yeah, before we were reachable all the time, and if you called someone and they weren't there, you had to leave them a message or hope that their parents or their siblings didn't pick up. So all of this to say, you called Quiet Connection today. You don't know who my next guest is because they're not here. So you don't know if they're a mom, if they're a dad, if they're a caretaker, what their experience is. But I'm asking you to leave them a message. Fun part is you can interpret that in any way that you want. You can leave any kind of message. I've had people be like, "Hey, what's up? I'm so and so. I hope that you have a great week," or whatever. And then I've had people that get really, really deep and everything in between. The woo woo part comes in with you will have to go to the episode that airs before yours to get your message when the time comes. And I'm going to check back and I'm going to be like, "Hey, did this resonate? Did it hit home?" But so yeah, so you don't know who my next guest is. I'll be meeting with them later today. But you called Quiet Connection and they weren't here to answer. So you have got to leave them a message. What message would you like to leave for them?
I think I would say, hello, parent. Hello, parent I've never met. You're probably doing a much better job than you think. Uh, be gentle on yourself. Treat yourself. Give yourself the same advice you would give a friend when it comes to just about any question you have, rather than beating yourself up first, because I think 99% of us tend to beat up ourselves. But we'd be so kind to our friends. So treat yourself like you would your closest loved one, and it's all going to turn out okay.
I love that. I love it. And every answer I get is unique. So every message has been unique. I'm really excited to check in with you guys later once the episodes come out and be like, did you get your message? Did it, or was it totally off the mark?
I like
Um,
it. No, I think it's a wonderful
yeah,
exercise.
it's cool.
We're
Um,
talking to each other through you.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. It was just something I was like, I'm going to try this. We're going to see how this goes. But yeah, Hilary, I so appreciate you spending time with me, being patient with me, sharing your knowledge with me and with the rest of the community in terms of parents who are dealing with chronic illness and disability. And yeah, this has been a joy, and I look forward to staying in touch for sure.
Me too. Me too. Thank you. This was wonderful for me too. Thank you.
Hilary, thank you so much for connecting with me. This episode was incredibly validating on so many levels. I hope Hilary's insights on parenting from the couch and building a culture of empathy in the home resonated with you, the listener, as much as it did with me. If you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend who might need to hear it. You can also stay connected with our community by following Quiet Connection Podcast on social media. Your story is powerful and deserves to be told. If you're interested in sharing it through a written feature or as a guest on the podcast, please reach out. You can contact me directly at chelsea@quietconnectionpodcast.com, or you can visit my website, quietconnectionpodcast.com. Join us next time when another story is told and you realize you are not alone. I see you.